Welcome to a channel where science meets daily action for a sharper, healthier mind. Here, we break down the powerful connection between what you eat and how your brain performs, not with vague advice, but with practical, science-backed tools. You'll discover how omega-3 fatty acids build the very structure of your neurons, how choline fuels focus, and how anthocyanins from colorful foods enhance blood flow and sharper thinking. We'll explore the gut-brain connection that shapes cravings and reveal how simple habits can rewire your palate so healthy foods actually taste rewarding. Each episode is designed to give you clear takeaways you can start using immediately, whether your goal is better memory, sustained focus, or long-term cognitive health. If you're ready to fuel your brain for peak performance and resilience, you're in the right place. When we talk about brain health and cognitive performance, one of the most overlooked yet absolutely essential elements is the structural foundation of our neurons. Every thought you have, every memory you form, every moment of clarity or focus you experience depends on the ability of neurons to communicate with each other efficiently. That communication isn't just a matter of electricity or chemistry, it's also a matter of structure. And the structure of neurons relies heavily on the presence of specific types of fats, in particular omega-3 fatty acids. Now, there are different types of fats, and many of them play important roles in the body, but omega-3s, especially EPA and DHA, are uniquely important for the brain. Think of neurons as having this fatty coating, almost like insulation around electrical wiring. If that insulation is thin, fragile, or inconsistent, the electrical signals don't travel efficiently. They get disrupted, slowed down, or even lost altogether. But if the insulation is strong, thick, and flexible, the signals move rapidly and reliably. That insulation is essentially the myelin sheath, and omega-3 fatty acids are key to building and maintaining it. EPA and DHA also become part of the actual membranes of neurons. These membranes are like the outer skin of each brain cell, and the fluidity of that membrane determines how well receptors and channels can move, how neurotransmitters dock, and how communication actually occurs. If you want your brain cells to talk to each other in the most efficient way possible, you need those membranes to be highly fluid and functional. Omega-3s allow for that. Without them, membranes can become rigid, communication slows, and cognitive performance declines. This isn't just theoretical. There are countless studies showing that adequate omega-3 intake correlates with better memory, improved focus, and even protection against cognitive decline as we age. In children, omega-3 support brain development and learning. In adults, they enhance performance under demanding conditions, whether that's academic, athletic, or professional. And in older populations, omega-3s are strongly associated with reduced risk of neurodegenerative disorders. In short, they help the brain function better at every stage of life. Now, people often ask, where do we actually get these omega-3s? The richest dietary sources are fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies. These provide both EPA and DHA directly. For people who don't consume fish, there are algal oils, which are plant-based but still contain DHA, making them a great alternative. There are also plant sources like flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. These provide ALA, another form of omega-3, but the conversion from ALA to DHA and EPA in the human body is relatively inefficient. So while those plant foods are valuable, they don't fully replace the need for EPA and DHA. When you consume enough EPA and DHA, you're not just feeding your body, you're literally rebuilding the architecture of your brain. Think of it like ongoing construction and maintenance on the most complex structure in the known universe. Without the right materials, the scaffolding becomes weak, communication breaks down, and performance suffers. With the right materials, neurons remain resilient, flexible, and capable of adapting to new challenges. Another key point is that omega-3s don't just influence the structure of neurons, they also directly impact neurotransmission and inflammation in the brain. EPA, for example, is particularly effective at reducing neuroinflammation. Why does that matter? Because low-level inflammation can silently erode brain function over time, leading to brain fog, poor focus, and eventually more serious problems. By reducing inflammation, omega-3s create a more stable environment for neurons to thrive in. DHA, on the other hand, has been shown to improve synaptic plasticity. That's the brain's ability to rewire itself, form new connections, and strengthen existing ones. Synaptic plasticity is at the heart of learning, memory, and adaptability. If you've ever tried to learn a new skill, remember complex information, or recover from mental fatigue, you've relied on synaptic plasticity. DHA makes that process smoother and more effective. So, when you look at the practical applications, the takeaway is clear. Getting enough omega-3s is not optional if you want to support smarter thinking and long-term brain health. It's foundational. Aiming for 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week, or supplementing with a high-quality fish oil or algal oil, can make a measurable difference in cognitive performance. The effects won't necessarily show up overnight. You're literally rebuilding cell membranes and structures, but over weeks and months, the benefits accumulate. Focus sharpens, recall improves, mental endurance increases, and resilience to stress strengthens. The beautiful thing here is that this isn't some exotic or complicated intervention. It's not a mystery hack or a fringe idea. It's basic biology, supported by decades of research, and it's accessible to almost everyone. By prioritizing omega-3 intake, you are literally fortifying the most important structure you own, your brain, and the impact isn't just in the short term. Yes, you'll likely notice improvements in concentration and mental clarity within weeks, but the real payoff is decades later. By investing in the structural health of your neurons now, you're building cognitive reserves that protect you against decline in the future. You're essentially future-proofing your brain. So when we think about smarter thinking and long-term brain health, omega-3 fatty acids aren't just one piece of the puzzle. They're the foundation the puzzle sits on. When we think about what allows us to lock in our attention, learn new skills, or maintain mental stamina over long periods of work or study, one neurotransmitter plays an especially central role: acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the chemical signal in the brain that makes focus possible. It acts like a spotlight, highlighting specific neural circuits while dimming down distractions. Without it, concentration scatters, memory formation weakens, and our ability to perform cognitively demanding tasks suffers. The question then becomes, how do we give our brain the resources it needs to produce and utilize acetylcholine efficiently? The answer lies in a nutrient that's often overlooked but incredibly powerful: choline. Choline is the dietary precursor for acetylcholine, meaning your brain can only make acetylcholine if it has enough choline available. If you're running low on choline, your brain literally has fewer raw materials to generate the neurotransmitter of focus and learning. That's why getting enough choline is such a direct and effective way to prime your brain for mental performance. It doesn't work by pushing your nervous system into overdrive or flooding it with stimulants. It works by supplying the essential building blocks for the system to function as it's designed to. The foods richest in choline are surprisingly common. Eggs are at the top of the list. In fact, the yolk is one of the most concentrated sources of dietary choline you can find. Salmon is another excellent source, and so are soybeans, lean meats, and certain legumes. For most people, adding these foods regularly into the diet provides enough choline to support healthy acetylcholine levels, and unlike many complicated supplement regimens, this is a simple, practical adjustment that can have profound effects on the way your brain operates. When acetylcholine is abundant and functioning properly, several things happen at the level of cognition. First, your ability to sustain focus improves. Tasks that would normally feel scattered or mentally fatiguing become smoother because the brain is literally better at filtering out distractions and honing in on what matters. Second, your capacity for learning increases. Acetylcholine is essential for synaptic plasticity, the process by which neurons strengthen connections and encode new information. Every time you study, practice a skill, or even absorb new experiences, acetylcholine is at work helping those circuits rewire. Third, it supports working memory. That's the type of memory you use in real time when you're holding a phone number in your head long enough to dial it, or keeping track of multiple steps in a problem while solving it. What's fascinating is that choline doesn't just affect focus in the moment. It also supports the health of the brain across the lifespan. In early development, choline is critical for forming the very architecture of the brain. During adulthood, it ensures that the brain has the neurotransmitter machinery to stay sharp and adaptable, and in later years, maintaining adequate choline intake has been linked to reduced risk of cognitive decline and better preservation of memory. It's one of those rare nutrients that serves the brain at every stage of life, which makes it especially important to pay attention to. Now, one might ask, if it's so simple, why do so many people overlook choline? Part of the reason is that choline hasn't been marketed or popularized in the same way as other nutrients like omega-3s or antioxidants. It's only in recent years that research has begun to highlight just how central it is for cognitive performance. Another reason is that many modern diets, especially those that exclude animal products without careful substitution, can fall short in choline. For instance, someone who doesn't consume eggs or fish may need to be more deliberate about getting choline from soy, beans, or supplementation. There's also the matter of how choline interacts with other systems. It's not just a single-player nutrient. When choline intake is adequate, acetylcholine doesn't just power focus. It also interacts with the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs states of calm and balance. That means acetylcholine helps us not only lock in attention, but also regulate the shift between states of stress and states of rest. In other words, supporting acetylcholine is about more than just being alert. It's about being able to modulate your nervous system in ways that keep you balanced and effective over time. If you've ever had the experience of sitting down to work, intending to concentrate, but finding your attention bouncing everywhere, it could be that your acetylcholine signaling isn't optimized. Supplying your system with enough choline won't magically solve procrastination, but it ensures that at the biological level, your brain has what it needs to generate the neurotransmitter that supports deep focus. When that resource is in place, tools like time blocking, disciplined routines, or focused breathing practices become much more effective because the neural machinery behind them is well supported. To put it simply, feeding your brain choline-rich foods is one of the most practical and science-backed ways to increase focus and mental clarity. It doesn't take weeks or months to feel the effects. Many people notice sharper attention and reduced mental fatigue within days of improving their choline intake. Over the long term, it's not only about performing better today, but also about protecting cognitive function for years to come. By making sure the raw materials for acetylcholine are always available, you're essentially ensuring that the spotlight of your attention remains strong and reliable whenever you need it most. That's why choline isn't just another nutrient on the list. It's a core element of how the brain learns, adapts, and focuses. When most people hear the word creatine, their mind goes straight to the gym, to weight training, or to athletes looking for that extra edge in physical performance. But what's often overlooked is that creatine is not just about muscles, it's also about the brain. The very same compound that allows muscle fibers to perform explosive work is also a vital source of quick, accessible energy for your neurons. And if you think about it, your brain is an energy-hungry organ. Despite accounting for only a small percentage of your body weight, it consumes a staggering portion of your total energy budget every day. Every thought, every memory, every decision is energy dependent. Creatine plays a critical role in keeping that system running smoothly. Inside neurons, creatine acts like a rapid reserve of fuel. The brain relies heavily on ATP adenosine triphosphate for virtually every process, from maintaining electrical gradients to firing action potentials. But ATP is not something the brain can stockpile in large amounts. It's generated and consumed almost instantaneously. That's where creatine comes in. Creatine phosphate acts as a buffer, a quick donor of phosphate groups to regenerate ATP right when neurons need it most. This is especially important in situations where there's sudden demand, recalling a memory under stress, focusing intently on a task, or solving a problem on limited sleep. In those moments, creatine helps stabilize energy supply and prevents neurons from running out of fuel. The result of this energy buffering is measurable in real-world outcomes. Studies have shown that creatine supplementation improves working memory, short-term recall, and reaction time. It doesn't make you smarter in the sense of adding IQ points, but it supports the energy needs that allow your cognitive machinery to function at its best. Think of it like ensuring your brain has a reliable backup generator. You might not notice it humming in the background, but when the lights would normally flicker during mental fatigue, stress, or high workload, creatine steps in to keep the circuits running smoothly. One area where this becomes especially relevant is cognitive endurance. Just like muscles fatigue after repeated contractions, neurons can fatigue after prolonged demand. Mental fatigue often shows up as slower recall, scattered attention, or difficulty holding multiple pieces of information in mind. Creatine supplementation helps extend the threshold before those declines set in. It doesn't replace sleep, nutrition, or recovery, but it makes the brain more resilient when the demands stack up. Students pulling long study sessions, professionals working extended hours, or individuals under cognitive stress can all benefit from that extra buffer of energy. What's interesting is that the brain naturally has creatine, supplied partly through diet and partly through internal synthesis. Foods like red meat and fish provide creatine directly, while the body can make some from amino acids. But not everyone gets enough through diet alone, and certain populations, vegetarians, vegans, or people under high cognitive demand, often show greater benefits when supplementing. That's because their baseline stores are lower, so the impact of raising those stores is more pronounced. In fact, studies have demonstrated that cognitive improvements from creatine are often most noticeable in individuals with lower dietary intake. Now, it's important to acknowledge that creatine isn't a stimulant. Unlike caffeine, it won't give you a sudden burst of alertness. Its effects are more subtle but far more foundational. Over days and weeks, consistent supplementation builds up creatine stores in the brain, and from there, it begins to support the metabolic backbone of cognition. That's why you don't feel it the way you feel a cup of coffee, but you notice its benefits when you're able to sustain focus longer, recall information more easily, and resist mental fatigue more effectively. Dosage matters here. The amounts that support cognitive health are similar to those used for muscular benefit, typically around 3 to 5 grams per day. That's enough to saturate brain and muscle stores without risk for most healthy individuals. And importantly, creatine has one of the most extensive safety profiles in all of supplementation. Decades of research confirm it's well tolerated, provided it's taken in reasonable amounts. What's remarkable about creatine is that it represents a bridge between physical and mental performance. It reminds us that the body and brain are not separate systems, but deeply intertwined. What fuels one often fuels the other, and creatine is a perfect example. While it may have earned its reputation in gyms and athletic circles, its role in supporting memory, focus, and resilience in the brain is just as powerful, if not more so. So the next time you think about brain fuel, don't just think about coffee or nootropics. Think about the molecules that actually sustain energy at the cellular level. Creatine is one of them, and by supporting the brain's most fundamental processes, it can give you a sharper, steadier, and more enduring edge in everything that requires thought. When we think about enhancing brain function, most people immediately jump to things like caffeine, sleep routines, or maybe even supplements. But one of the most powerful tools we have for supporting sharper thinking and protecting long-term brain health comes from something incredibly simple: colorful foods, particularly those rich in anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are the compounds that give blueberries, blackberries, purple grapes, and other deeply pigmented fruits and vegetables their vibrant color, and these compounds are not just decorative. They have profound effects on the way the brain functions and how it ages. One of the most important actions of anthocyanins is their ability to improve blood flow to the brain. Your brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. Even though it makes up only about 2% of your body weight, it consumes about 20% of your oxygen and glucose at any given time. That means the delivery of blood to the brain is not just a background process. It's absolutely central to how well your neurons function. When blood flow is robust and efficient, neurons receive the oxygen and nutrients they need, and waste products are cleared quickly. When blood flow is compromised even slightly, neurons begin to struggle and cognitive performance declines. Anthocyanins help optimize that blood flow by improving vascular function. They make blood vessels more flexible, reduce stiffness, and support healthy circulation. This improvement in blood flow translates directly into better mental performance. Studies consistently show that consuming anthocyanin-rich foods can enhance cognitive tasks such as memory recall, processing speed, and problem-solving ability. It's not a subtle effect either. People who incorporate these foods regularly often show measurable improvements in brain function within weeks. What's more, these benefits extend across the lifespan. Children and young adults consuming anthocyanin-rich foods often perform better on learning tasks, while older adults experience better memory retention and reduced cognitive decline. It's one of those rare interventions that supports the brain at every age. But anthocyanins don't just work through blood flow. They are also powerful antioxidants, which means they combat oxidative stress in the brain. Oxidative stress occurs when free radicals, unstable molecules generated by metabolism and environmental factors, damage cells, including neurons. Over time, this kind of damage accumulates and can impair communication between brain cells, leading to brain fog, slower thinking, and eventually neurodegeneration. Anthocyanins neutralize these free radicals, protecting neurons and the delicate membranes that surround them. This antioxidant effect preserves the structural integrity of brain cells and keeps communication pathways running smoothly. Another fascinating aspect of anthocyanins is their influence on signaling within the brain itself. Research shows that they can increase levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF is often described as fertilizer for the brain because it supports the growth of new neurons and the strengthening of synaptic connections. When BDNF levels are high, your brain is more adaptable and better able to learn and retain information. By supporting BDNF, anthocyanins don't just preserve brain health, they actively enhance its plasticity, giving you a sharper, more resilient mind. From a practical standpoint, this means that simply adding a handful of blueberries to your breakfast, incorporating blackberries into a snack, or choosing purple sweet potatoes at dinner can provide real, measurable benefits for your cognitive function. These aren't marginal changes. Over weeks and months, the compounds in these foods accumulate in the brain and begin to reshape its environment, making it more resilient to stress, better nourished, and more capable of high-level performance. It's also worth noting that anthocyanins don't act in isolation. They interact with other nutrients and systems in the body. For example, when combined with omega-3 fatty acids, the protective effects on neuronal membranes become even stronger. When paired with proper hydration and exercise, the improvements in blood flow are amplified. This means anthocyanins are best thought of as part of a larger toolkit for brain health. On their own, they're powerful. In combination with other science-backed strategies, they're transformative. Many people assume that something as simple as fruit couldn't possibly have such a profound effect on the brain. But the research is remarkably consistent. People who eat anthocyanin-rich foods regularly show better brain function, healthier aging, and greater protection against diseases that impair cognition. And the threshold isn't high. You don't need to eat pounds of berries a day. Even modest, consistent intake provides benefits, so if the goal is to think more clearly, to protect memory, and to ensure the brain has the resources it needs to perform not just today, but in the decades to come, anthocyanins are a tool that should not be overlooked. A handful of berries might seem like a small act, but inside your brain, it's fueling blood flow, protecting neurons, and strengthening the very circuits that make you who you are. One of the most fascinating and powerful aspects of human biology is the way the gut communicates with the brain. For a long time, people thought of the gut as simply the place where digestion happens. Food goes in, nutrients are absorbed, waste comes out. But in recent years, it's become clear that the gut is far more than that. It's an active signaling system, sending constant information to the brain and shaping how we feel, what we crave, and even what we choose to eat next. This is sometimes referred to as the gut-brain axis, and understanding how it works can completely change the way you think about diet and behavior. When you eat a particular food, the gut doesn't just break it down mechanically and chemically. It also evaluates it. Certain nutrients trigger specific receptors in the gut, which then send signals upward through the vagus nerve and through circulating hormones. Those signals tell the brain how rewarding that food was, how filling it was, and whether or not it should be pursued again. Over time, this signaling actually trains your brain to develop preferences. That's why certain foods feel irresistible. They've been paired with strong gut-brain signals that reinforce the desire to eat them again and again. This isn't always a good thing. Highly processed foods, especially those engineered to be hyper-palatable with sugar, salt, and fat, can hijack this signaling system. They create powerful gut-brain associations that lead to cravings far beyond the body's actual nutritional needs. That's why you might find yourself reaching for chips, candy, or soda even when you're not hungry. The gut has learned to signal that those foods are rewarding, even if at the level of cellular health they're not. The good news is that this system is plastic. Just as it can be wired toward unhealthy foods, it can also be rewired toward foods that truly support long-term brain and body health. How does that rewiring happen? It begins with repeated exposure. When you consistently eat nutrient-rich foods, vegetables, lean proteins, berries, whole grains, your gut starts to recognize the presence of those nutrients and reward the brain for choosing them. The first few times, you might not feel strong cravings for them because the gut hasn't built that association yet. But over time, as the gut experiences the benefits of those nutrients, stable blood sugar, reduced inflammation, steady energy, it begins to signal to the brain, "This is good, seek this out." What was once bland or uninteresting starts to become genuinely satisfying. That's not just a shift in taste, it's a biological rewiring of your preference system. This also explains why certain food cravings fade when you stop consuming a food for a long time. If the gut no longer receives a particular input, the signaling loops that supported that craving begin to weaken. Think of it like a well-worn path in a forest. If you stop walking it, eventually the path grows over and becomes harder to follow. Meanwhile, if you carve out a new path by repeatedly walking it, that becomes the route the brain and body prefer. The same thing happens with food signaling. Another important element of gut-brain communication involves the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive tract. These microbes interact with food, produce signaling molecules, and even generate neurotransmitters that impact mood and cognition. A diverse, healthy microbiome tends to support balanced cravings and stable appetite. A disrupted or imbalanced microbiome, often the result of a diet heavy in processed foods, can send confusing signals to the brain, driving overeating or poor food choices. By feeding your gut with fiber-rich, nutrient-dense foods, you also feed beneficial microbes, and in turn, those microbes support healthier signaling to the brain. It's worth noting that gut-brain signaling is not just about cravings in the moment. It also affects long-term satiety and satisfaction. When your gut and brain are in sync, you're more likely to feel truly nourished by a meal, less likely to overeat, and more capable of stopping when your body has had enough. That sense of satiety isn't about counting calories or forcing discipline. It's the natural result of your biology working the way it was designed to. The practical application here is simple but profound. If you want to change your eating habits, it's not just about willpower. It's about leveraging this gut-brain feedback loop. By deliberately choosing foods that serve your brain and body and repeating that choice consistently, you teach your gut to signal back to your brain that those foods are rewarding. Eventually, you'll crave them just as strongly as you once craved processed foods. And when that happens, healthy eating stops being a constant battle. It becomes automatic. So when we talk about smarter thinking and long-term brain health, it's not just about what you put on your plate today. It's about how today's choices train your gut to influence tomorrow's cravings. Over time, you are literally rewiring your biology to prefer the foods that support the best version of your mind and body. One of the most fascinating features of the human nervous system is its ability to adapt based on repeated experiences. The foods we crave, the flavors we find delicious, and even the sense of reward we get from eating are not fixed. They are learned patterns shaped by associations in the brain and reinforced by the signals coming from the gut. This means our palate is not set in stone. With the right behavioral tools, we can actually rewire our preferences and reshape what tastes rewarding. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen reliably when you understand how the system works. Take the example of artificial sweeteners. They are designed to provide the sweet taste of sugar without the calories. But here's the problem: when the brain experiences sweet taste, it anticipates an energetic reward. Normally, sugar delivers glucose and the brain gets what it expects. With artificial sweeteners, the sweet taste arrives, but the energetic payoff does not. Over time, this creates a mismatch between the sensory signal and the actual outcome. The brain starts to uncouple sweet taste from satiety and instead craves even more sugar to resolve the gap. That's why people who rely heavily on artificially sweetened drinks or foods often still experience strong sugar cravings. The system is being trained, but in the wrong direction. One way to rewire that system is to unpair sweet taste from the idea of reward. That doesn't mean cutting out all sweetness entirely. It means being mindful of how often you expose the brain to sweetness without nutrients to back it up. By gradually reducing your reliance on artificial sweeteners and shifting toward whole foods that contain natural sugars, such as berries or other fruits, you allow the brain to realign the sweet signal with genuine nutritional value. Over time, this lowers the threshold for what tastes satisfyingly sweet. A handful of blueberries, which might have once seemed subtle compared to soda, begins to feel rich and rewarding. The craving for ultra-sweet, nutrient-tempting foods diminishes, not because you're forcing yourself to resist, but because your biology has relearned what sweetness means. The same principle applies to nutrient-rich foods that may not taste compelling at first. For example, many people don't initially enjoy the bitterness of leafy greens or the earthy flavors of certain vegetables, but repeated exposure changes that. Each time you eat those foods, even if you don't love them at first, your gut registers the nutrients and sends signals back to the brain. This food is beneficial. This food sustains us. With enough repetition, your palate starts to recalibrate. What once felt bland or unpleasant becomes enjoyable, even craved. This is why cultures that eat certain foods regularly from a young age tend to genuinely enjoy those flavors. It's not genetic fate, it's repeated training of the gut-brain loop. It's important to recognize that this rewiring process is gradual. Just like building a new skill or strengthening a muscle, you have to give the system time to adapt. The brain and gut don't flip preferences overnight. But within weeks of consistent repetition, noticeable changes occur. Foods that felt too bitter, too bland, or too boring begin to register differently. The dopamine response, the actual chemical signal of reward, shifts in favor of those foods. This is biology's way of reinforcing patterns that keep us healthy and resilient. Another behavioral tool that accelerates this process is pairing nutrient-rich foods with contexts that are already rewarding. For instance, eating vegetables during a meal when you're relaxed and socially engaged can make those foods more appealing. The brain learns to associate them with positive states. Conversely, eating them only when you're stressed or forcing yourself to be good can strengthen resistance. Context matters. The nervous system wires itself not only to the food itself, but to the entire experience around it. What emerges from all of this is a very empowering realization. Cravings are not just psychological weaknesses to be resisted. They are biological signals that can be reshaped. By deliberately changing what you expose your brain and gut to and repeating those exposures consistently, you take control of the circuitry that governs your food preferences. This isn't about knuckling your way through diets or forcing yourself to avoid temptation forever. It's about retraining the system so that the foods that serve you best are the same foods your body naturally seeks. And the payoff is enormous. When your palate aligns with nutrient-rich foods, healthy eating stops being a constant struggle. You don't have to rely on discipline alone, because the foods you enjoy are the same foods that nourish your brain and body. Sugar cravings fade, processed foods lose their grip, and whole foods start to taste genuinely satisfying. That's not willpower, that's biology rewired in your favor. So if the goal is to reshape your relationship with food, the most effective way isn't to fight cravings, but to retrain them using repetition and smart unpairing. Over time, you'll find yourself not just choosing healthier foods, but actually wanting them. Thanks for watching. If these tools sparked new insights into how food shapes your brain, hit that like button and subscribe for more science-backed strategies you can use every day. Stay consistent, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next episode.